in a house filled with difficult women. The only son of a harridan who sent her husband, my father, packing for love of another married man. We were poor, my mom, my 3 sisters and me, in our 3 small underfurnished rooms. And for a long time, truthfully my whole life, I convinced myself that this single fact of my boyhood, this isolation with too many women, was the most formative piece of my story, hands down. The twist that made me, me, and formed my sperm-headed view of the world. Then one day, I realized that this was a lie, or should I say an incomplete truth. I was sitting in my shrink's earth-toned womb of an office. Martha was asking me about my mother, who looms like Medusa over my insides, turning traitorous thoughts to stone. She knew about Ida already, of course, but not until that day had the question of rape been on the table. Ida was raped many times in her life. During her time as a big-breasted girl running fast with Italians, as a teenage bride bartered to a sadist to save what was left of her reputation, as a woman whose integrity, such as it was, pivoted first and foremost in her own mind around being an excellent fuck. These were the painful details I was sharing with Martha when she scrunched up her face all of a sudden and stopped me. "Your mother was raped?" she asked. "All of the women in my family were raped," I told her. She seemed shocked. I was shocked myself, not because this information was new, but because I'd never said it out loud before, which meant it only half existed. Now that it did, now that I'd said it, a truth so obvious that I'd missed it blasted a hole through my storyline, the version of things I believed to be true. It wasn't being trapped in a house filled with women that had turned me into the very strange person I was, but growing up in a house full of raped women. The nightmarish reel of flashbacks began, staring into Martha's eyes, pictures of naked female flesh, the pornographized landscape of childhood. But these pictures revealed themselves differently now. Not as women whorishly wasting themselves, as others had described it to me when I was a boy. Not spreading themselves uncontrollably, prompting despair and abandonment, but as their bodies probably were. Accosted, betrayed, and chewed up, largely against their will. The images came back to me in a rush. My mother locked inside the bathroom, hitting her head against the tub, weeping, whispering, "I want to die," as I screamed and beat on the door until it opened. Then staring into her 2 dead eyes, a trickle of blood sliding down her neck from hitting her head against the enamel. My beloved elder sister Marcia, escaping the husband who beat and degraded her, bound and gagged her, and then dumped her for another woman, prompting her suicide at 29. My other older sister Joyce, being chased outside my bedroom door in the middle of the night, a strange man's voice coaxing, "I'm not gonna rape you," and then disappearing at 15 to a home for unwed mothers. My baby sister Belle in hysterics at 10, crying at me that the neighbor whose child she'd been babysitting had been touching her in a bad place. Wrong! And me confronting him, age 13, with a barbecue skewer on his patio. These memories were just the beginning. There were more. There were echoes. The rapes continued by men and soon enough by themselves, as my mother and sister sold themselves short, raped their own choices, potential, respect, forced themselves into 2 small, tawdry lives with men who used them as pleasure mules. The memories came back to me, and as I described them, revealing so much more of the truth, a disturbingly different, more accurate picture began to emerge in myself, of myself. It wasn't estrogen overload that had turned me into a rescue artist. It was rape overload, abuse overload, an excess of feminine self-mutilation, an absence of innocent love toward a woman. Nowhere in retrospect was there a memory of a woman adored, exalted, or blessed. Nowhere an image of feminine eros protected, beloved, refined, rendered precious. And nowhere an entry for me to love in the way that a man or a boy needed to love in order to free himself from guilt. The guilt of not saving what he cannot save. The shame of needing to run away because he can't face the unsavable women. The disgrace of being forced to choose between himself, his life, and the women whose sacrifice freezes his heart that he needs to survive with despair. Because these women were all I had. I loved them in spite of everything, beyond words. And for a long time, this love was too much to face in light of the safety I could not give them. This was the bone true story. I realized that day in Martha's office, the kernel of mourning that I buried in rage. This was shocking to me. This unmasking of grief. My memorial manhood began to unclench, forced me to share in their violation, to feel the assault on these women I cherished. Far easier to blame the victim than to share in their helplessness, I realized. But in telling this, I had no choice. There was nothing to hate now but violence itself, nothing to despise but men out of control, which plunged me into the heart of the matter. If men were rapists, then so was I. My childish black and white logic had informed me of this long before I even had words for these things. As a fatherless kid starved for any male virtue to believe in, for faith in this this sex I was born with, I blocked the truth to save the faith that men could also be good and trusted, that I would never inflict such pain. We do this, we men, very often, I think, without even realizing it. Every day, for every reason the mind can invent for why the violence is deserved. If Eve isn't guilty somehow, bringing the blood upon herself, then Adam cannot rule the world. And so the blame-shifting lie continues until one day, if we're lucky and ready, we men drop the story, start to grieve, and the cycle, the ignorance, comes undone. I tell my story differently now if anybody wanted to hear it. I come from a family of raped women, but that no longer makes me a rapist. It makes me a man with a broken heart. I come from a family where cocks were weapons, but that does not make me a war machine. It makes me a man with a dangerous power. Women have their own dark ways, equally fierce and beautiful. Now that I've grown into a man, I can say what men do without hating myself or mistaking my power for violence. The tenderness of wolves, they call it. The exquisite absence of blood amongst killers. This is the tenderness that men can give to women. This is the story where shame finally ends.